in the BI Platform studio, and I'm speaking with Alec Sharp, internationally acclaimed consultant and instructor on data modeling and process modeling at Claritech Systems Consulting. Alec, in our conference that we did earlier this year, you had a session entitled Concept Modeling and the Data Process Connection.
Yes.
In this session, you talked about a topic, guerrilla modeling, on a guerrilla modeling tactic to get started on concept modeling. Can you briefly elaborate on why that tactic would be necessary?
Okay. You just reminded me that several years ago, I wrote a series of blogs for C.A. Irwin, and the first one was on guerrilla modeling. And that was based on some experiences I had early in my career where I tried to teach the business clients about data modeling before we actually did data modeling. And I had one experience where the business people, they pushed back very strongly. They were not happy with me trying to teach them about entities and relationships and so on. So I backed off and I realized, of course, I shouldn't be teaching them my methods. I should simply be learning their business. So my approach is always to get the client engaged in concept modeling or conceptual data modeling, if you want, without them realizing it. And that often begins simply with a conversation or some one-on-one interviews where they tell me about their business, what they do, what the issues are. And what I do is I listen for the language they use. What are the terms that they use? And later, we will bring people together into a facilitated session, say, and we will start looking at the terms and decide which ones are synonyms and which represent the important things they need information about. And later on, how do we define these? What are the likely sources of confusion? How do they relate? And I have worked with business people, including groups of C-level executives, the most senior people in an organization, where they have built a very robust concept model without realizing that they are doing something like concept modeling or data modeling. And I've also done this with in-person brainstorming for what are the terms you use on a daily basis, or even an email survey. But we can start with language. And then out of that, we extract the core nouns, which become the central entities, and we proceed. And it works very well in every kind of organization you can imagine.
Yeah. But why is it that such a guerrilla tactic would be needed? Is the importance of concept modeling still underrated? And if so, why?
It is underappreciated, but that is changing very, very rapidly. And I must say, especially in Nederland, I'm finding there is an awareness right to the senior levels in the organization of the importance of data. And I'm not sure if this is because of GDPR or just the realization that data produces the information that we rely on, but there is a much appreciation of, that's a strange phrase, of the awareness of how important data modeling is. And I think we have to look at, why did data modeling or concept modeling become so unappreciated? And it was largely because of a lot of common failings, most commonly diving too quickly into too much detail. In fact, even diving quickly into physical database design. In the workshops we run, Werner, we often have agile teams showing up who have realized they really need to get on board with this concept modeling. Now, they might call it domain modeling or business object modeling. The name doesn't matter, but they realize it is an absolutely critical step in starting to identify the services, the events, the use cases, the user stories that the client needs. But the root of the problem was confusing physical database design with data modeling and getting far too quickly into too much detail.
Yeah. Technical detail.
Yeah,
Okay.
very much.
On the data process connection, the second part of the title of your session, would you start with the process model to identify your most important data concepts, or vice versa?
Ah, well, that, my friend, is the chicken and egg question. Which comes first? And my preference is to start with the concept model, which surprises people, but it actually works very well. Now, first, we have to have some general idea of the scope of the initiative. You know, what are we, what are we considering? Is it customer onboarding? Is it product launch, dispute resolution? But within some overall umbrella term, I again, as I said earlier, I focus on language. You know what? I'll have a conversation, I'll listen for the terms, and I'll start to help isolate the core nouns. Because the central nouns in your business, the ones that are used on a daily basis, will become the entities that form the heart of your concept model. And once you do that, it's so much easier to start to identify your processes. So if you have, say, a product, product is a noun, then I say, well, what verbs go with that? Well, we develop a product, we launch a product, we assess product performance, we revise a product, we retire a product. Once you give a business audience a noun, it becomes much easier for them to start to identify what happens to that thing, that noun. And the results become the events or the activities that make up our business processes. Sometimes they are entire business processes, like develop a product.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, having said that,
Yeah.
I don't always get my way. So many times I have to do some process work, but as anybody who's taken my workshops know, my number one guideline for processes is they must be named with at least an active verb and a noun. So I'm already forcing awareness of the importance of that noun, which of course will become an entity.
Yeah. Okay. And how do you validate a conceptual model? And who's the person, which role should sign off?
Mm. The validation, this is an important thing to me. This is why years ago I developed a course called Facilitation and Presentation Skills for Business Analysts, because presenting the product of your work, whether it's a process model or a data model or a set of use cases, you develop those through facilitating and interviewing, but you have to play it back in a presentation. So what I simply do, my basic technique is to present the data model back to the business, not putting a completed data model up on the screen, but building it, on the screen or on a whiteboard, one entity at a time, and talking about this thing and what it means and how it relates to other things using absolutely no data modeling terminology. If you listened to one of my review presentations, you would have no idea I was talking about a data model, because you would never hear the words entity, relationship, attribute, cardinality, optionality, supertype, subtype, recursion, none of that. It's just simply a description of a business. And once I've done that, then I will take each entity and say, okay, what happens to this? The verb noun pairs again. And when something happens, like we onboard a client, does the data model support that? Does it have the information we need? Does it have a place to store the information we're creating? And I'll even validate the data model by going through the process model, one
Okay.
step at a time. And again, asking, does the data model provide the information needed by this step? And does it have a place to record the data created by this step? And as for who should be involved in the validation, my simple answer is everyone. I do this for the executives who depend on the information provided by the data. I do this for managers and supervisors who are managing based on the data, and frontline individual contributors who rely on the systems that use the data. So everybody is involved. It's an equal opportunity exercise.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, nowadays you cannot not ask the AI question. So
It is required. You must ask the AI question.
so could AI play a role in conceptual data modeling?
Yes, I think it absolutely can. But I will add the usual cautionary note, which is don't depend too much on what you get, say, out of Chat GPT. In fact, I was on Chat GPT last night, and the first they had three disclaimers, and the first one was this might have mistakes. Don't
Oh, yeah,
rely on
yeah,
it
yeah,
exclusively. So with that in mind, so that's one point. Don't rely on it too much. And please don't use it as a starting point. You might use it for your own research, just the way I use Google or Google Images for my research. But I would not put in front of a group of business people, here's what Chat GPT thinks about this subject. I'm always going to begin with, as I've said, I'll talk to the business people. I'll have them help me identify the core nouns. I'll have them help me define them. And my central question when I'm doing definitions is, how could we as a group legitimately have differences of opinion about what we mean by, say, a customer, if we're trying to define customer? Then I might bring in what Chat GPT says. And in fact, in preparing for our interview last night, I went to Chat GPT and I asked, how could we have different interpretations of what is meant by a customer? The answer it came up with is nothing short of fantastic, fabulous. They outline how different departments could have a different of opinion, how, say, frontline employees versus management could have a different opinion, how it depends on the life cycle stage of the customer. So it was an absolutely
yeah,
fantastic
yeah,
answer. But I wouldn't start there, because if you start there, it's like the reason I do not use off-the-shelf process frameworks, because it's easy for people to get lazy and say, okay, some other smart people have worked on this. We'll just say, yeah, that's good enough. You have to make people really think and then bring in these other
yeah,
resources.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, Alec, thank you very much for the interview.
Thanks, Werner, and I'll look forward to the next time we can chat in person.